Hello everybody, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about one wonder kid from every single Premier League club. A player that is going to go or... But we don't want to put too much pressure on these kids, you know? We don't. So it's just a bit of fun. We're going to have a little look at each Premier League club and how they're getting on. Before we get into the video, do me a favour. Hit the subscribe button. We are doing really well at the moment, and you guys can help me do even better on our long road ahead to 100k. So take 5 seconds. I'll give you 5, 4, and hit the subscribe button. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. Also, hit that like button if you've been enjoying the content recently and if you enjoy this video by the end of it. Let's get into it, kicking off with Arsenal. There's only one man when it comes to Arsenal, Saka, 19 years of age, and he's been absolutely unbelievable. And importantly, I think for his development, he's played so many games for Arsenal and he's become an integral part of this team. It's amazing. He's even playing for the senior side as well, with England, of course. And I think, look, he has strengths, he has weaknesses. We'll talk about that with every single player. I think the weakness, if you look at the stats, it's his long pass accuracy, but that's not really what he's on the pitch to do. So far, it's 36.5%, which isn't great. But the big thing with him is it's about creating, isn't it? And it's about progressing the ball with his dribbling, which he brings to this Arsenal team in absolute spades. Consistently helping the team move up the pitch. It's huge for him. And, you know, working with Tierney and his movement, playing in a load of different roles, actually even just within the game, not just one game at left back, then one game at left midfield. He's moving all over the place. The ceiling for him, that's the big question. I don't know how much better he can get. Let me know in the comments below. I'm fascinated. We've all seen Bakary Saka so far. We think he's brilliant. I think he's got an incredible attitude as well. But how far is he going? Is he a world beater or is he just a very good player? Let me know in the comments below. On to Aston Villa, and you could go with Jacob Ramsey here, but I'm not going to go with Jacob Ramsey here because, to be honest, he's made 5 appearances so far. He's only made 1 start, and I think really the wonder kid that you've got to keep an eye on is Louis Barry. Louis Barry in the Premier League 2. Obviously, there's not a lot of footage of him or stats of him in terms of Premier League experience, but he's 17 years old, played in that FA Cup game, scored an absolutely unbelievable goal. He's clearly a brilliant finisher. I'm intrigued to see how he develops as a player, because I think he can play out wide, but can he hold the line as a central striker? Physically, I think with the sports science that you have in the Premier League now, you would hope that any player will get to their peak physically, but that's got to be the one question mark at the moment, because in Premier League 2, he's only had 9 appearances so far, 7 starts, and he scored 6 goals already. And to put that in comparison, he's the 2nd highest top scorer in that league, and Aston Villa are struggling. They're 10th out of 13 teams so far in that Premier League 2. So for him to be the 2nd top scorer is a massive sign that Aston Villa have got an absolute baller on their hands here. Tariq Lamptey is the only choice for Brighton, and there's a big discussion point here. Is Tariq Lamptey wasted as a right wing back for Brighton? I'm going to say no. Now, some people would say, look, he's got all the attributes to be that old-fashioned winger, but I think it's a struggle to kind of have an old-fashioned winger these days. And actually, what I would also say is that, you know, for fullbacks, for the top 6 sides, for teams that dominate, the fullbacks are kind of playing as a winger at times for a lot of them, or it can be utilised in that way. See that with Andrew Robertson. And I see that in Tariq Lamptey. I love him in that position. And the move from Chelsea to Brighton was a brilliant one for all concerned. Maybe not Chelsea, but of course, they've got other names who we might be talking about in this video very soon. But for Brighton, he's been superb. He's creating 2.44 shots per 90 from a right wing-back role, but they're really giving him that freedom to get on and create for the team and using the traits that he's got, which is that burst of speed, that low centre of gravity. He's tenacious as well, and 2 goals have come from fouls that he has won from him being fouled. So that highlights how he gets there before you. And so if you are going to make a challenge or go to ground, he's probably going to be able to skip from you. I think he's just a glorious footballer. For me, I see him as a right back or an attacking fullback for the rest of his career, because I can see that move to one of those top clubs. And then all he'll really be focusing on, to be honest, is that attacking side of his game, a bit like he is at Brighton as well. The biggest thing we can say about Tariq Lamptey is that we've spoken about Saka and people have raved about how brilliant he is. But actually, Tariq Lamptey's numbers are better than his, which is crazy. In terms of progressive carries per 90, Lamptey 8.67, Saka 7.3. Carries into the final third. The final third, remember, this is a right wing back. 3.16 from Lamptey. Saka does 2 per 90 and carries into the 18-yard box per 90. 1.3 for Lamptey and 1.02 for Saka. So if Saka's brilliant, Lamptey per 90 minutes has been even more effective. On to Burnley, and it's got got to be Dwight McNeil, but only because he's of the past 2 seasons, to be honest, not because of this season. He's been actually quite poor. The biggest stat, the most glaring one for me, is that he hasn't had a shot on target so far this season at time of recording. I think that's a big thing that highlights one or two things. Like, is he in a struggling Burnley team? Possibly, yes. But is he being a little bit cautious in the way that he's playing as well? Or is Sean Dyche asking him to be a little bit more cautious? Maybe a culmination of all three, but the stats don't lie on this one. In the last couple of seasons, he's offering at least over a shot a game. For a team in the lower mid-table, I think that's generally okay. But this season, 0.53 per 90. Not great at all. Only 1 assist so far this season. His pass completion this season is 71.9%. Last season it was 68.4%. That leads to the idea that maybe he is being a little bit more cautious as he gets a little bit older. Is he starting to kind of be a bit concerned about what he's doing when he's doing it instead of playing a little bit more off the cuff like most youngsters do? He is averaging more touches per 90. So, his involvement in the game is going through the roof. But what is he doing with that ball? Is he taking those risky passes? It doesn't seem to be, and they don't seem to be coming off as well. Previously thought as a player that could get himself near the England squad. I think now you're starting to see that maybe he's a little bit off those top players that we're seeing in the Premier League now. When you've got the likes of someone like Maddison, who can't even get himself in the England squad, feels like me that Dwight McNeil now is actually kind of levelling out, and you're starting to see that maybe he is just an average Premier League player. It feels harsh, and I might be wrong, and maybe it needs to be a move, or maybe the investment from Burnley, as in terms of their new owners, that could change everything for him. But he's got some big decisions to make himself in terms of, does he want to make that move, or does he want to try and grow with this Burnley club, because he could stagnate. So many options at Chelsea, but one massively stands out for me. I'm a fan of him already. You know who I'm going to say, Rhys James. I think he's glorious as a footballer. You guys know that. But you've got the likes of Gilmour, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Kai Havertz, all 21 or under. And for me, Rhys James has been one of the most complete players, or had the most complete season of all of these guys. He's had more minutes than all of them. He's displaced the club captain, who, to be honest, hasn't done anything too wrong to lose his place. But it's just a case that Rhys James is a better player. I think that experience at Wigan, being that centre midfielder, highlights that his ability to play those progressive passes. His pass completion success rate is 83.2 this season, which I think is brilliant. In terms of his passes into the final third, that's really high this year as well, 43, 3.58 per 90. So he's got that positive attitude. He's fearless with his passing and his creativity. And he's playing on the front foot, which I think it's massive for them. The big thing that you've got to say when it comes to Rhys James is that if you look at the best right back in the league, Trent Alexander-Arnold last season, who we know is maybe not having the same quality of season in terms of his attacking output. For me, I've said it before, I believe Rhys James is maybe a little bit more balanced as a right wing back than Trent Alexander-Arnold. Because if you look at the areas where people suggest that Trent Alexander-Arnold is lacking, Rhys James has got better stats. Tackles per 90, Rhys James 2.6 to Trent's 1.48. Interceptions per 90, 1.25 to the 0.52 for Trent. And clearances per 90, 2 for Rhys James, 1.33 for Trent Alexander-Arnold. Look, I think that's a little bit too base as an argument when it comes to those two, because I think what Trent's having to deal with this year is a general understanding of him as a player and him in that role. Rhys James is a little bit earlier on in his time in the Premier League, and so maybe that season for him is next year. And so we will see with that. But at the moment, Rhys James is the best of the lot when it comes to Chelsea, in my eyes, in terms of the Wonderkids. And I've said it from the start, this guy's going to the very, very top. Speaking of players I'm absolutely in love with, Abeer for Crystal Palace, of course, former Queen's Park Rangers player who I absolutely love and miss. Blotching, he's so good, but you've all seen it this year with some of the quality. The goal against Sheffield United, and just generally a very, very effective player, and actually quite a unique player in modern football, because I don't think you see as many players at the moment in those sort of attacking midfield areas who just wants to pick up the ball and dribble, and he loves it. He has such grace. I've said it before. His progressive carries this year have continued when he's moved up to this league per 90, 8.69 per game. He's so comfortable in that, and that's something that would be of use to any team in this league, and I mean any team in this league. And I think that will show as the years go on. This isn't the end for Crystal Palace and Eze. Of course, he's only just signed. And I think actually it highlights the intent of Crystal Palace going forward to sign a player like Abeer Eze. And if you look at the under-23s and the football that they're playing, keep an eye out for Crystal Palace in the coming years. But the shot creating actions per 93.36, that's a great base to build on for playing with strikers that probably aren't as brilliant as other teams in the league, or playing for teams that dominate the ball as much as Crystal Palace don't do. They've never been that kind of side, but they're trying to move towards it. Like I said, this guy is something special and would be unique for any club to have. Anthony Gordon. Now, Anthony Gordon is probably the closest thing to Richarlison at the club after Richarlison himself. Look, he's a good player, and I think we saw him come onto the scene last year. And Carlo Ancelotti, he's trying to kind of sort of ease him into the squad. A lot of Everton fans have been frustrated with the fact that Cenk Tosun often gets on the pitch ahead of him because you want to see him develop. But I think that time will come with that one. And the big thing that you could say with this is that he's not been allowed to go out on loan. The only moments he's really had have been in the Carabao Cup, where he shone in the early rounds, playing on that left-hand side with alongside Niels and Cuckoo. And it's going to come, I think, but there aren't much numbers to kind of suggest that he's going to be this shining star. But the big thing is he's not been put out on loan. Look at Man City, look at Phil Foden. You don't let those players go out on loan unless you want to use them at the very least, or you think that they're good enough to put them in if you need them. So maybe not the season that he wanted, Anthony Gordon, but it's coming. A name that you don't know right now, but I think you will know in the next few years, Fabio Carvalho at Fulham. In terms of Wonderkid, he was struggling otherwise, so he had to go into the under-23s. And in Premier League 2, he's done bits. He's done serious bits. 7 appearances this season, 7 goals and 4 assists. So 11 goal contributions in 7 games from an 18-year-old is a great start for him. 18 years old, originally from Lisbon. He's played for England under 16s, 17s and 18s in the last 3 years, which just highlights that he's obviously got that pedigree. And we know the kind of ballers that England are starting to produce now. So for an attacking midfielder, which I always say, if you're the attacking midfielder, that means you're the best player in that team. I think it highlights that he could be the best player in this Fulham team in the next few years. Remember the name. He's had his first team debut in the Carabao Cup, Fabio Carvalho. For Leeds United, I'm going to go with Illan Meslier. The reason I'm going to go for him is I think he's kind of had a bit of a hard time, and it's growing pains for him. He's probably in games so far this season. One, look, he's saving a lot of shots, which is great for his development. His concentration has got to be sky high all of the season. In terms of numbers, it's not going to be great for him, but that's just generally Leeds because they are stats busters themselves. But big games against Everton and Burnley, if you look at who scored, he got the highest rating of any Leeds player in both those matches. A brilliant shot stopper. And for him to come in, deal with the pressure of the Premier League and to thrive overall, I think is massive for him. And let's remember, goalkeepers have a long shelf life. So for him to sort of get those games, it's one where you'll look at him right now, and if he can kind of get through, not a rocky patch, but a patch of chaos when it is playing for Leeds, then for the rest of his career, he's going to have a wonderful career. Wesley Fofana could well be the signing of the season for me. I just think he's glorious. So good on the ball, happy to dribble out with the ball. In terms of his progressive passing, it's been absolutely evident this season. 49 passes into the final third this season already. 0.75 shot creation actions per 90 as well. That's from a centre-back, let's remember that. He's been absolutely huge for them, and I think has been able to kind of deal with the slack of the not having Johnny Evans in the side at times, or not having Sionchu in the side at times. And actually, he's probably the first name on the team sheet in terms of that defence now, probably even above Johnny Evans, because it's not just for me his ability on the ball. I think he just sees danger. Sometimes with defenders, you don't have that reading of the game. Wesley Fofana has that reading of the game. I just think he's so good. And Leicester City, in terms of where they want to go this season, he's going to be absolutely integral in that. And I think he has taken them up a notch. The defensive stats back that up. Already over 50 tackles and interceptions. He's also got 50 clearances this year, which again, I think just highlights his reading of the game, which I think is probably his best strength, in my opinion. They could do something this year, and it would be a big part down to Wesley Fofana, an absolute bargain of a signing. Now, when it comes to Liverpool, of course, we could go with Trent Alexander-Arnold in this one, but I'm going to talk about someone else just because we know how brilliant he is. Curtis Jones, 19 years of age, already won a Premier League winners medal. And I think the big thing for me with him is that the trust that Jurgen Klopp has shown in him this season has been huge. And I think it lays down a very good marker that he's both got the potential, but actually the end product at the moment as well to start for the champions of the Premier League. I think that's huge for him and his development, especially at the age of 19. That's got to be really, really exciting. Positives and negatives with him as a player. In terms of his attacking output, I think that can be progressed a little bit. At the moment, his passing success is 91.3% overall. 9.2 passes into the final third every match. The problem comes when, in terms of creating and picking the lock. Obviously, Liverpool are a possession-based side and they sometimes struggle to unpick that lock. And for him to be a big part of this team, he's going to have to learn how to do that. Shot creating actions per 90 this season, 2.81. For a team that's dominant as Liverpool, that's probably a little bit disappointing for him so far. And in terms of passes into the box per 90, 1.6. Again, that could be down to that low block a little bit, but I think it's an area where, in terms of his passing and the purpose of his passing, that could be something that he could work on. Only 1.6 dispossessions per 90. So I think what that says to me is that actually, at the moment, of course, as a 19-year-old, he needs to fit into the midfield. It's not his midfield right now, but being under the tutelage of someone like Thiago, you've got Fabio in there, Henderson as well, he's only going to get better. And maybe he's actually destined for a deeper role in this Liverpool side. Time will tell, but he's getting an amazing education at the moment at Liverpool. And it goes both ways because, as I said, he's trusted by Jurgen Klopp. For Man City, it's got to be Phil Foden. He's been brilliant this season, really taking it up a notch. And the thing I like the most about him is that he's a proper finisher. Look at the goals he scored this season. And look at his XG as well, I think, which is important here. For a team in Man City that has not been, it's been underperforming in comparison to its XG. 2.1 from Phil Foden this season in terms of the expected goals from him. He's actually scored 4 goals this season, 2 assists, and that's bettered his numbers or equaled his numbers in comparison to last season when it took him 23 games to get involved in all of that. Still, I think he can have more starts from Pep Guardiola. I would like to see that, not just for my FPL team, but I do think for the progression of him as well. But he's a really, really good finisher. His pressures have been good as well, 125 pressures so far this season. So defensively, he puts the work in for the team as well. Really smart player, creating as well for him. He's got absolutely everything. He can go as far as he wants to. And of all of the picks of those attacking midfielders that are exciting us in football at the moment, he's got to be in the top 1 or 2. So tough for England. But Phil Foden, you know, the pedigree that he's got, the tutelage that he's got, and now the output that he's got, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit and the being Staying in Manchester, we're going to go with Mason Greenwood here, but I guess he's had, there are gentle worries, very gentle worries, and I think, look, you need to almost give full weight to both, and I think we're going to end up in the middle. And when I mean full weight to both, it's looking at his XG last year, which was 3.6 last season, and he scored 10 goals. Just let that sink in for a second. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. This season, he's only got 1 goal and he should have scored 1.7 goals in terms of XG. So he's struggling a little bit this season. You know, that second season syndrome, I think that's going to happen for a lot of players. I think it naturally does because teams know what you're about a little bit more. There's a higher expectation for you as well. I think when it comes to him this season, he needs to get back to getting that shot on target. If you look at the percentage this season, 26.3% of his shots are on target. And if you compare that with the rest of the Man United squad, it puts him beneath the likes of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Nemanja Matic and Alex Telles. So there's a gentle concern there, okay? He's played a lot of football and instead of just coming in, and I always think that with these players, is you come in and there's such adrenaline for you. But then the next season, there's expectation, and that's very, very different. So I think he just needs that little bit of time, needs to get that 1 goal, get the confidence back, especially as a striker. That's always going to be part of it. But I see him as one of the most deadly finishers, and I still think he's a cracking footballer. He's just having a bit of a wobble this season, and I think he'll come good. Newcastle United, I'm going to go with Matty Longstaff. Burst on the scene last year, of course, with that great goal against Manchester United. 2 goals last season from 2 shots on target, and the XG of those 2 are 0.4. So he's got a goal in him, but I think he's also quite tenacious, which I like. I think he's probably at the level that he's going to end up at, if you know what I mean. Like the fact that he's been struggling to kind of hold down a place this season, only 5 games played, 4 of those starts this season. So he kind of needs to play more football to see where he can go. And if he is one of those who can maybe drop down and then go on and progress, then he needs to get those games. I think otherwise, you're struggling maybe for a Wonderkid at Newcastle. As we know, they do struggle to kind of be that free-flowing team. But Matty Longstaff, I think we like him, don't we? We liked what he was about last season. Good passer of the ball, tenacious, but needs more games. Really does need more games. It's been a tricky season for Sheffield United, and one of the players I think they were hoping were going to allow him to kind of maybe go to the next level instead of going down a level was Ethan Ampadu. I think the problem that he's had this season, despite having that kind of unlimited composure that he has and the dexterity to play as a holding midfielder or as a centre-back, which he's done both in 190 minutes several times this season for Sheffield United, is I think deep down, I think you want to see him as a holding midfielder. I think that's where he's best, personally, in my opinion. And playing for Sheffield United, I think at times he's been targeted by a few teams and not having that aerial prowess to be that kind of centre-back for them. So it's been a real baptism of fire. I think down the road we'll see this as a really great education for him, because he could have gone to maybe a championship club after maybe struggling at RB Leipzig. Only got 3 appearances off the bench last season despite doing well in that Champions League game against Spurs. But this has been a real baptism of fire for him, and you hope. I think a lot of Sheffield United fans have been a bit frustrated with him. I think he was a bit of a great hope for them, and it's not worked out in that sense. But if you look at that one win that Newcastle have got against Newcastle, ground duels won 5 out of the 6. Aerial duels won 7 out of 8 when he played in midfield. Man and match performance to 99 touches in that pass accuracy of 88.2% and 2 key passes. I like him as a midfielder personally, and I hope that's where he ends up. I think this year is one of those where, do you put him at a team that's going to do well in a league campaign, be it at the Championship or Bundesliga or wherever it might be, or do you put him at a Sheffield United? I think deep down they were hoping that you'd have a mid-table Premier League side there this season, but it hasn't turned out that way for Ampadu, and I think he'll grow from it. You just hope his reputation isn't hurt that much by it, or his confidence. Next up, Southampton, I'm going to go with Nathan Tella. Now, I don't know too much about Nathan Tella, and so Southampton fans, please help me with this one. Let me know in the comments below. I've obviously got my stats on him, and Football Manager I found really interesting on him because it looks like he plays in such a range of positions. He can play anywhere along the midfield, it seems like. Central midfield, inverted wingers on both sides. He can play as a winger himself as well. And I think in terms of the minutes that he's got so far this season for Southampton, actually a lot of those minutes have come in games, where he's actually ended up being a forward himself. So not too much to say about that in terms of his Premier League quality. I think he's probably one of those who needs to go out on loan and find his feet, because he's probably a bit too good for the under-23s now, because he's at a point where he's got himself 4 goals and 2 assists in just 3 appearances in Premier League 2. So he's obviously a talent. When he has played for Manchester City, it looks like he's played as a left winger or a left-sided forward, 50 minutes and 59 minutes. Not enough data on him so far, but in terms of the ability for Southampton to bring through talent, you've got to be excited with another player as he bursts onto the scene and makes his way into this team. Needs to go out on loan because he's halfway in between an under-23 player and a first-team player. Needs to go and do that and see what he's really like before we can truly put a judgment on him. Alfie Devine, born in 2004. 16 years of age, he's already scored for Tottenham's first team against Marine in the FA Cup. He can play defensive midfield. He can play as just your regular kind of centre midfielder. And he's got that little bit of nastiness. Obviously, a lot of people might know about this one, but in an under-23 match against Danny Drinkwater, he crunched him. Apparently, Danny Drinkwater was very, very unhappy about this, and it kicked off in a big way. So he's got that little nasty side to him, but it seems like he's got really good feet and technique as well, which you're going to need to be if you want to play for Spurs, because you're going to have a bit of everything to play for Jose Mourinho. Taken from that Wigan Academy, of course, they were due to administration. They were able to get a lot of players on the cheap. And there's another Wonderkid who was sold actually to Leeds, Joe Gelhardt. So keep an eye on him as another name to keep an eye on. But hopefully he can stick around. We've seen these in the past, Spurs with these Wonderkids that don't really get to kind of fulfill their potential. So he's one of those who you can't see him starting for them in the next couple of years with the big names that Mourinho likes to bring into that midfield. So he's going to have to go away and do something. But to be getting first team action at 16 says a lot. Unfortunately for West Brom, the Wonderkid that you've got, you don't actually own him. It's Conor Gallagher, who in the Championship last season was absolutely fantastic for Charlton. I think a big reason why Charlton went down was losing him to Swansea in the second half of that season. They looked to kind of make that move and progress him almost as a player, from a player who's in the lower reaches of the Championship, then to a Swansea side that played brilliant football. He's then gone to West Brom, again in terms of his education, moving on up, and he's been brilliant for West Brom in a team that's really struggled. Look, a lot of his stats, they're struggling because West Brom are struggling, and I think those stats are also going to be difficult because of the fact of the way that Sam Allardyce plays. But the stat I really like about Conor Gallagher this year is the fact that I think this West Brom team trusts him. He's got the 5th most passes out of the entire West Brom squad. In terms of midfielders, there's only one player remains, Sawyers, who is ahead of him. So as a 20-year-old coming into this team, this West Brom team, they're happy to trust him with the ball, which I think is a really big marker. I like the fact that he is box to box. I think he can get himself a goal. He's got that kind of Frank Lampard vibe to him. And he's just a really great footballer. And I like the steps of his education. Like I said, Charlton, Swansea, West Brom, who knows where he's off to next year. I think he needs another loan before he gets himself anywhere near this Chelsea first team. But at 20 years old, he's getting the games, he's getting the experience, and he's getting the responsibility. Now, I'm going to break my own rule here. Don't get angry at me. I'm doing it. It's my channel. Look, he is 22, but Declan Rice, I think we just need to highlight that. He's 22. He's played 117 Premier League games. He's pretty much the captain for West Ham now. Mark Noble doesn't play as much as he used to. And I think that's just got to be celebrated. And not only that, when we look at his stats, this guy's going to be playing for England for a long time now. And I've said previously that I'd like to see him as a centre-back. But actually, if you look at his dribbling stats this season, look at last season, I think he had the most tackles in the league. This season, it's his dribbling, it's progression with the ball that really, really astounds me. He's attempted 21 dribbles this season and succeeded at 18 of those. For a defensive midfielder, I think that's amazing to have 85.7% as your completion rate, success rate of every dribble. 5.8 progressive carries per game. Again, as a defensive midfielder, I think it's just incredible for him. And I think it just highlights not only that, but you've seen it in these games, his ability to spray the ball, his fact that he's made himself an England regular as well. And that's why these top clubs are taking notice of him. That dribbling ability is going to be integral when he does make that move to a top six side, which I think for a long time we were all thinking, is he good enough for that? But I think if you count his age and you look at these stats this season, it makes him look pretty press resistant, which is something that I think England have been crying out for a long time. So his development is going in exactly the right direction. So watch this space for a player it's only going to get better, because you've seen it year on year for a player that's only just turned 22. Last but not least, and it's one of many when it comes to Wolves, because you have the likes of Fabio Silva, Morgan Gibbs-White, but I'm going to go with Pedro Neto, who's only 20 years old, and in a team that's really struggling this season, his responsibility has gone up massively and his numbers are gently going up. I think long term you might see the burst of this next year, maybe the year after that. But at the moment, there are obviously those growing pains in terms of his output, but the responsibility has gone up. He's taking more shots this year. Last season, 1.63 per 90. This year, 2.13. And then onto shot creating actions per 90, it's gone up 0.64. Last season was 3.35. This year, 3.99. And again, I think the important word here is responsibility, which he probably wouldn't have wanted to have to undertake, but he has had to undertake all the same. And so for him to be the second highest source of shots this season in this squad, a squad with a lot of experience, I think that speaks volumes. Right then, guys, there we have it. One Wonderkid from every single Premier League club. Let me know what you think about these players so far, especially fans of each of these teams, because you know these players probably a little bit better than me in terms of the amount of minutes that you've seen them. But diving into those stats, I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you have, do two things for me. Hit the like button. It massively, massively helps me and this channel. And secondly, of course, subscribe to the channel if you have enjoyed the content and want to watch more, hitting the notification bell as well. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye-bye.